Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, August 2nd at 5:30 p.m., and we are calling this regular meeting of the Wake County Board of Education to order. I want to welcome those of you that are watching at home and those that are here in person to observe the Board of Education as it conducts its official business. And I want to take a moment to highlight Board Policy 2310, which states, Wake County Board of Education meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the official business of the school system. The public is cordially invited to attend board meetings to observe the board as it conducts its official business. Persons who willfully interrupt, disrupt, or cause disturbances at an official meeting may be directed to leave by the presiding officer. Members of the audience should show respect for speakers and by refraining from loud comments or other disruptions. Disruptions by any person or persons of a public meeting will be subject to action in accordance with General Statute 143-318.18. At this time, we have all board members present, including the superintendent and our attorney, Jonathan Blumberg. And I would ask that you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. At this time, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Superintendent Moore for her comments.
Good evening. There's still time to donate to the Wake Ed Partnership's Tools for Schools Back to School Supply Drive. Each year, North Carolina teachers spend an average of $526 of their own money for classroom supplies for their students. Wake Ed opened Tools for Schools in January to help close that gap and ensure that all students have the supplies they need to focus on learning. Hundreds of teachers have already taken advantage of this program by shopping for free classroom supplies at the Tools for Schools store in Cary, with many more signed up to do so. There are donation drop-off sites all over the county. You can also shop from the Amazon wish list and have supplies delivered straight to Tools for Schools headquarters or make a financial contribution. Go to wcpss.net/toolsforschools to find a list of drop-off sites and most requested items. The Back to School Supply Drive ends August 16th. It's almost time for another back-to-school tradition, the Kickoff to Kindergarten event at Marbles Kids Museum. On Saturday, August 20th, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., rising traditional calendar kindergartners can learn the basics of kindergarten so they are prepared and excited for their first day. Students will go through a lunch line, hop on a school bus, and try out some typical school day play. Parents can also learn more about various community resources. The event and museum admission are free for rising kindergartners and their families. Pre-registration is required. Go to wcpss.net/kickoff to learn more and register. Congratulations to Dr. Maria Rosa Rangel, Director of Family and Community Engagement in the Office of Equity Affairs. She recently received the Innovators Award from the Leadership Institute for Future Teachers program at NC State University. LIFT is a 5-day invitational program for students of color and bilingual students who are rising high school seniors and are interested in enhancing their leadership skills and exploring a potential career in education. Dr. Rangel, who oversees the WCPSS Family Academy, has been an educator for 26 years and was recognized for her outstanding commitment to promoting equity and inclusion. The fifth core belief of our strategic plan states that our district values a diverse school community that is inviting, respectful, inclusive, flexible, and supportive. Dr. Rangel's work in support of this belief has benefited countless numbers of students and families. Congratulations on this well-deserved recognition. Lastly, students from 11 elementary and middle schools recently participated in Summer Champs, a week-long summer camp hosted by the Helping Hands Mentoring Program. Students rotated through science, creative writing, art, and the Power Hour, a daily workshop designed to push students beyond their comfort zones. The camp was hosted by Barwell Road Elementary School. Please take a look at this video of our students in action.
I want to change the world and I want to be like Martin Luther King Jr.
It is the next day.
But you wake up in your bed with a dream?
I made a I am from poem.
And that is how Anansi the spider got all of his stories.
Summer fun. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore. We want to make sure we welcome our Track 4 and modified calendar students, families, and staff. Track 4 started this past Friday. I do want to take a moment to lift up our Alston Ridge Middle School community. They were informed that their computer science teacher, Miss Robin Wilson, who was formerly a faculty member at Cary High School, passed away after visiting family out of state. And so we want to lift up those students, their school families, and Miss Wilson's family as they deal with her passing and in their time of mourning and grief. And counselors were at the school this morning to help out students and faculty. Wake Ed Tools for Schools. I had a wonderful time volunteering, seeing our teachers. It's an incredible program where teachers get 100 points every quarter in order to shop in the school store. There's even a free wall of gently used items that were donated from companies. I highly recommend all of our WCPSS teachers and staff looking into that. Wake Ed Partnership also recently hosted a career accelerator for students so they could see different possibilities outside of the classroom for when they graduate, and our summer STEM program that helps our teachers out. And so we certainly want to thank Wake Ed Partnership and their partners for all that they do in order to help our students see what's beyond the classroom, help our teachers, and also in not just in the Tools for Schools, but in the summer STEM program and how they can bring learning back to their classroom. So those are my comments, Vice Chair Hangerty.
Thank you, Chair Mahaffey. You actually covered a number of the topics that I was going to talk about. We have seen a lot of great success with the Wake Ed Partnerships, Tools for Schools Drive, and then the summer learning program they're doing has been really exciting, and some of the great job experiences that they're providing for our students. One thing that is coming up in addition to, well, as you know, you said Track 4 schools has already begun, but then traditional calendar schools, kindergarten registration is coming up at the end of the month now, and that's going to be a very exciting time. We have a new kindergarten. I'm going to hold this up for Miss Cash because this is our new school principal at Barton Pond Elementary, Stephanie Costa, and we've got a lot of new exciting stuff about the school coming up, and a lot of the residents have been asking about kindergarten registration, so we're really excited to get that started. I just wanted to make that point for you. Thank you.
Miss Cash, I think we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm going to beat that. Speaking about Brassfield Elementary, actually, I was invited by the new principal there, Mr. Elliott, to go to their Meet the Teacher night. That was on the 28th, and he's hilarious, I must say. So when you get Chris McCabe and Mr. Elliott together, it's pretty funny. You can't imagine. But anyhow, the Meet the Teacher night was just totally filled in their new renovated school, and so many parents were out. I saw so many people I knew that were bringing their last children, probably that they have high schoolers and middle schoolers and now kids going through elementary. So it was kind of like old home week for me in Brassfield, and we miss Stephanie a lot, but Mr. Elliott is going to be a great act to follow her, so I'm very proud of him as well. And the following morning, I went to Brassfield again because they have the renovated campus, and was able to walk with the PTA and many of the parents there. I'm just so impressed with our PTA people. They just, they're in the schools. They're not really acknowledged much. They're not known by so many people, but they work there every day. And we went around the new campus, looked at some things that they'd already done themselves to the renovated campus and changed. And the inside of Brassfield is beautiful. Some work on the outside left to do, which we will be talking about, but the inside is beautiful. And then also, Principal Faircloth and Principal Sanchez from Durant Road Middle and Durant Road Elementary invited me to a beautiful 97-degree Saturday event outside at the Marsh Creek Park. And I spent an hour and a half. They and all their teachers and their PTA, again, amazing, were all there for about 4.5 hours. And they went to the communities that attends their school that are not near the school. And I could not even get into the pavilion. It was so packed. And I was there late, but like I say, it was 97 degrees. The kids and their parents, there were, Wakehead Partnership was giving out the tools that the children needed for school. There were people, interpreters for the community to help people sign on to Power School. There were, I'm going to give better kudos to people by name in the next board meeting, but there were so many people there to actually help them fill out their forms for free and reduced lunch. The fact that these parents were just moms and dads and whole families came out to just find out what they could do to make their kids successful in schools. And the teachers were all there, and the counselors and the principals, and to me, I think it was the highlight of the last 6 years that I've probably had. And I've said this a few times to a few of my principals, but that day was a highlight to me because it made what we're all about, helping all kids in Wake County. And so I was glad to be there. I visited a few other schools this last week to do some things, and welcome back to the year-round schools, of course, Track 4. So it was it was a really good week, getting to see parents, teachers, staff, principals do what they do best.
Thank you, Ms. Cash. Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Thank you. Not much news, so I will start with thanking Barwell Road for hosting Helping Hands, which you saw an amazing video that speaks to our community partnership and our school partnership. And if I've learned nothing else on this board, it's the community doesn't often know all of the partnerships that we have in our school system, and Helping Hand is a long-term partner for the school and probably the first community partner that I met in our schools when I joined the school board, because at that time they were actually running after-school programs pre-COVID in some of our schools, specifically in District 2. So we are glad to have them back in our buildings and be in a partnership that, as Dr. Martin always says, learning should and can be fun, and that's certainly what we saw this summer with the Helping Hands program at Barwell Elementary. So thank you to all who made that possible and helpful. Moving on to continue with partnerships. You heard some of our board members mention at the last board meeting, and I was even more excited after listening to our board members to go to the Boys and Girls Club. One of the things that I did not know that was new to me, and they do a lot of amazing things, they're a major partner, in addition to being able to see several of our little kids. I did not play ping pong, but I really was tempted, but I'm not that coordinated, but that was the game that they wanted to play, and I was like, I could probably beat all of you all in foosball because that was my game. But ping pong is not my jam. And I did not get wet outside. It was 97 degrees, and they were having water fun. But I will say I learned two things that I did not know that many of you may know, but I would guess the bulk of our public probably doesn't know this. When our kids go through Boys and Girls Club and they are part of their education cohort, those education coordinators go into our school and work directly with our teachers and sit in the classroom to observe their students to ensure that they are contributing to changing the educational outcomes for those students. That was tremendous to me. And so I met with the education coordinator, actually, who now is moving to another job, but still at the club. But she walked me through several cases and students and partnerships. And one of the things that I think is important that we all know, But it is also, for her, she said the difference it made is some days teachers were just glad to have another hand in that room who cared about students who needed the support. That speaks volumes to our partnership, but also more so to the community. Hopefully that speaks to the need that we need to fully fund our public schools so that when we have partners, that's not the gap they're feeling, but certainly there are other gaps that we need them to fill, but it should not be filling the space that our educators need support in their classroom. So thank you to all the great things I learned from Boys and Girls Club. And the second and last thing that I'll say about that is they currently certify students with ServPro through the Boys and Girls Club so they can go through the program and be certified for jobs. And there's a whole list of things, but those are two things that I want to highlight that I didn't know going in. And I should also note, I visited them all 8 years I've been on the board. And I was like, the good news is you always learn something new. And those were two things that I'd like to lift up about those partnerships with the Girls and Boys Club. And lastly, welcome back to all of our students, educators, and families who are back. On August 1st, we so eloquently christened in our house as a house full of Wake County Public School lovers. And none of us have ever been on track for a year round, but it is our first day of acknowledging it's time to get ready to go back to school. I'm a Southerner. My mother believed that I should go to bed early and start practicing good school routines. So I've been trying to institute it in my house. It's like, it's August 1. It's time to start back getting to our school routine. And my daughter's like, that's not a real thing for sleep, right? But in my mind, we are preparing. So August 1, while we did not go back to school with our year-round calendar, modified calendars who are also back, we did begin the preparation to start back school. So the Hostler household is slowly addressing, which is our late start for this year in a very long time of starting later this month. But we certainly are geared up and excited to have folks back in our buildings and ready to learn, and parents and volunteers ready to engage as we all prepare for those of us who are left on the traditional calendar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hustler. Ms. Carter.
Thank you. And kind of continuing on with the Wake Ed plug there, I had the opportunity to visit one of their career immersion days, and the one I went to was at Wolf Speed, and really appreciated the opportunity. It was great. Of course, I go and they're like, "I know you." I know some kids from Davis Drive, and then one student he remembered just from being at a Navy Junior ROTC event from Cary High. It was great. Very diverse group of students. And not only that, but I just have to talk about one of the activities. Okay, yes, they learned, they sat there and had interns telling them different things about different majors. One actually switched their major after getting to college, which is always useful to hear, because some folks feel like if you can't ever take a detour, sometimes you do. And so it was interesting listening to that part, but then they got out these things called Makey Go, and I've never seen them. So some of you have, right? So now I want one, and it's just like, okay, so excuse me, but USB-like stick, and I'm probably saying this all wrong, but this is how I remember it. You plug it in, and it's got like an alligator clip, okay, and then at the end there's like this metal thing. So they're learning about what's a conductor, what's I might be saying that wrong. Anyway, and so they had different objects they passed around, so the students would put it to the metal part, and then they had a website they could go to, and it would run this little thing and say if it was conductive or not, that kind of thing, which was great. Well, then we took a sidetrack, and this is where I really okay, so electricity was great, yes, but then you could use it to do Flappy Bird, okay? So I'm not good at video games, I'm just going to put that out there, but at all, whether it's on a phone, console, any computer, that's not my thing. I enjoy them, but I'm not great. So, but it was great to see, because students, they're like all about that, and ways to use, like someone were using a paper clip to still use this Makey Go thing to control the Flappy Bird on the okay. So some of them got like to the 20s. And then one student's like, "You've got to try." I'm like, "Okay, I'll try it." Okay. I couldn't get to 2. And I was really trying, but the whole thing. But it was just great to see their excitement. And then they transitioned to, the interns had made like a homemade operation game. I'm sure, I grew up playing like the real, well, they had and again, using the Makey Go and having that there. It was just a great just a great afternoon that I spent with them, and just want to thank Wake Ed for that opportunity and all the partners, because I know there were so many businesses that participated, but that was just one little snippet, but I appreciate that. And yes, I went to the Raleigh Girls Club, and I'll be honest, I've never been to one. I've never visited to learn all about it, but it was fantastic. They were playing, I call it a fierce kickball game inside. That was wonderful to see. And then they were working on different dance groups, and then you talked about the Serve Pro and all that, but then they took me to the art room and talked about one of their girls won they enter a national contest, and they have a winner. The Raleigh Girls Club actually has a winner. They're working on getting like something to put up for that work that got that award, but it was wonderful to hear, and I would like to go and visit the Teen Center too, because it's not just a boys, girls, but the Teen Center is just, I think, just as important as the other two, and would love to learn. They need volunteers, by the way, if you're interested, because those students are coming to us as well, and that's another way to support our students. And for those who are thinking, well, they pay, what do they do? It's $7.50 for an entire year if they have it. That's it. And so they are pouring in a lot to those kids. And it's whether you have the ability to pay or not, but even if they do pay, it's $7.50 the whole year. So I think that's an important, because they do some amazing work with those students, and that has a direct impact on not only what happens in their classroom, but also what happens when they leave, because many of them come right back and volunteer. Some actually end up coming back to work there, and it just can have such a tremendous impact on those youth. So I appreciate all the staff there, the volunteers, and those who support those programs. And lastly, I'll just say it's great seeing all the high school, in particular, athletes really in action, the middle school, the bands, marching bands. I know Green Hope's marching band went on a field trip, and so it's great to see all that, and congratulations, because there are some rosters that have already been put out there, so congrats to those who have made some teams, and keep working hard for those who are still working on that at this point, but I'm looking forward to seeing some great events coming up soon, so thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Waters.
Thank you, Chair Mahaffey, and I'll say thank you to Ms. Johnson-Hostler for the reminder to get to bed early, so I'll pass that on to my 3 and my 12-year-old tonight. And as a new board member, it was really important to me to get out and visit all of the schools in District 4, and I finally completed that. I visited Longview School last week, and of course the students were not there, so I had a chance to sit down with their principal, Principal Harris, and really get a chance to learn more about the school community. It is a really special place. It serves students who have a lot of needs, and that school community is really important to our district and important to our state. And so Principal Harris has been a teacher at the school and is now leading the school, and he has such energy and excitement to cultivate the needs of the students. So I'm very glad to be able to be a part of the work that is being done there, and I look forward to going back again when the students are there. And Fuller Elementary has a new principal, so I wanted to welcome Principal Hernandez to the district. He is new to Wake County, so I hope his first couple of days have been exciting, and I look forward to getting over there to see the new Fuller School building. And also wanted to welcome back all of our track force students as well. I hope they're having a good first few days of school. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate the acknowledgement from my colleagues about the Wake Ed Career Accelerator. Was able to even see Senator Crawford, who represents the eastern part of Wake County, and she was able to come back and help with that as well. And she is an East Wake High School graduate. So, but so many great things, and I appreciate all of the on our social media being able to follow along with all the great things that the students are doing, and a huge thank you, as always, to our local business community for partnering with our schools. And Ms. Carter said the thing about the marching band. So we do have marching band camps that are taking place now or took place already. So I can tell you that if you hear one of those bands warming up and you want to know if there's any way you can help them, they will always appreciate donations, water bottles, Gatorade, and so forth. So please make sure you reach out to them. Some people go to football games. No offense to any of our football teams, but some people do go to those. They call them marching band games. So just keep in mind that they could use some support and love too. Wanted to say congratulations to Wendell Elementary School's PTA. They received national recognition for their efforts and outreach and support that they're doing with their school, and they do an amazing job. And a huge thank you to all of our PTAs for really stepping up, in particular the last few years. And again, thankful for the work from Activate Good that Ms. Cash and Ms. Johnson-Hassler are partnering on. Supporting the schools that don't have active PTAs, and also filling in that gap are many of our chambers in District 1 and throughout. Some of the local municipality chambers are doing great works with providing school supplies and just helping celebrate our schools as they either have started or are getting ready to start. And ditto to the we're going to bed early tonight to practice. I like that. No, I won't blame you. But, a lot of great passion from our schools as we get things started. And just remember, this is another, it's a big lift for our teachers and our principals right now. They're still stressed. They're going to need a 5-year vacation at some point. Not now, please. For the ones who are here, no, thank you so much for loving our students, because they feel it, and our kiddos deserve to feel supported and excited about school. Our public schools, I say it, I'm going to keep saying it as long as I can, they remain such a unique and sacred and special place where we all come together and learn to do things together and appreciate each other. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. I, too, want to congratulate everybody. The schools started Track 4. Really glad for the conversation we had today in the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Thank you to the staff for what you've done with the recommended budget. Very glad we're going to be able to see some raises for our faculty and staff. All that said, it is still disappointing that those raises are far from keeping up with inflation. So, if we're lucky, it's not even half the rate of inflation. So, glad that some progress is made, and yet, unfortunately, we're still falling behind. That also raises a concern. Ms. Scott just gave thanks again for all the teachers and staff staying in the schools. I want to share that thanks, but I'm also equally concerned with staffing. It's not just locally to Wake County, it's national news that we're having a very difficult time hiring enough teachers and other staff. Those who are still committed to education, thank you. Those who would consider it, please do consider it. It's a very important profession. In spite of all the challenges that get thrown at us, it's a very difficult profession, but it's a very necessary profession for our society. So thank you, and we need to do what we can to try to make the profession as good of a profession as it can be, and safe working conditions, which brings me again to the COVID update. We had good, robust discussion about this in work session. I believe there's still a lot of work that we need to do. I frequently get, where do you get your numbers from? I do not generate any numbers. I merely collect data that's publicly reported. If anybody wants to know the 7-day weekly average, it's not that hard to calculate. You can go to the Wake County COVID website, and you can click on the data button, and you can see the various graphs in which you can get a table of the last 14 days. If you want to know the current 7-day average rate, generally you should not count the last 4 days reported, because they will change as more numbers come in. So disregard the first 4 days sum up the next 7 days, take that number, divide it by the 1.12 million population of Wake County, multiply that by 100,000, and that will give you your case rate per 100,000 population. Right now, that sets us at 315. We've been bouncing between 300 and 330 for the last 2 weeks. All trends are showing that the numbers are going up. That, unfortunately, that 300 to 330 is kind of the bottom of the well, and we're poised to see that well take off pretty much right away based on last year's trends. 2 weeks ago, there were 91 students, 51 staff who are out with COVID. Well, infected. Those are the new infections. Last week, there were 127 students and 34 staff. So those numbers are approximately twice what it was 1 year ago. So what we're looking at, if we had a virus that was equally infectious as 1 year ago, we're looking at going up into September, where we will have probably 1,000 to 2,000 students out per week and 200 to 300 staff out per week. So that would be if the trend continues with the same level of infectivity. So we're looking, unless we take different action, we're looking at a substantial number of absences coming up in the fall. Right now, the state data does the disaggregation. The state data, again, is 2 weeks old. The latest is for the week of this 7/17. At that time, the state data had 300 cases per 100,000 population for a week. The 5 to 9-year-olds were at 199. The 10 to 14-year-olds were at 197. The 15 to 17-year-olds at 123. So, as typical, when students are out of school, the school-age population is below the county average, but that trend has now started to shift as the students have gone back for year-round school. So, a lot of concern, a lot of work that we need to do as a community. And I'll conclude by noting that I remain very concerned that we need to enhance our policy and practice, particularly for students and staff with special needs. There's very clear instruction by the CDC and the Department of Education. We need to provide equal opportunity for all students, and that sometimes requires the rest of the community gathering around to making it safe for everybody else. We do that with peanut allergies. There's absolutely no reason we should not do that for COVID. We've got work to do. Let's do it together as a community so that all students have an opportunity to learn in their classrooms. Thank you.
Ms. Kushner.
Thank you. And I'll be brief, just welcoming back all the students that have started school on the modified and multi-track and track 4 calendar, and happy summer, continued summer to those who are starting later this month. It is a late start for 29th.
Thank you, Ms. Kushner. At this time, I'll take a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, thank you very much. We now move on to public comment. Public comment is accepted in video, written, and in-person formats. Members of the public are welcome to offer comments or criticism directed at substantive ideas, actions, or procedures of the board and individual board members. The laws and policies of North Carolina provide that issues or concerns involving individual personnel matters are confidential and therefore not appropriate for public comment settings. Concerns related to personnel issues may be addressed through applicable WCPSS personnel, the grievance policy, or other applicable policies. Those offering comments to the board, including students, may discuss issues and matters of general concern, but should refrain from discussing confidential student information. Concerns related to confidential student matters may be addressed through applicable WCPSS personnel, the grievance policy, or other applicable policies. We have 9 written comments from members of the public. If you would like to submit comments as part of our public comment portion, they are linked on the same online agenda we're using for tonight's meeting, And that agenda, as well as guidelines for those wishing to submit comments, can be found at the district's website, wcpss.net, under the tab labeled School Board. We have 5 comments about election days, 1 on thanking teachers, 1 on school curriculum, 1 on Title IX changes, and 1 on COVID planning and accommodations. For those that are here in person, you may speak for up to 3 minutes. A yellow light will illuminate at the podium when there are 30 seconds remaining in your time, and a red light will signal your time is up. In the interest of maintaining civility and decorum, speakers are encouraged to address their comments to the Board of Education and to refrain from personal attacks and insults directed at the board, individual board members, staff, or members of the general public. Please remain at the podium during your speaking time. Any materials you wish to share with the board should be handed to Mr. Blumberg, our board attorney, either before or after your comments. We have 14 folks who have signed up for public comment today, starting with Eva F. Lee.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I'm Eva Ali, Assistant Council Commissioner for Recruiting for Occoneechee Scout Council and District Membership Chair for the North Star District comprising much of Wake County. As this school year kicks off, my son is a rising senior at Millbrook. He earned his Eagle rank just 2 weeks ago, and he is doing his best to become a midshipman at the U.S. Naval Academy next fall. Scouting focuses on citizenship and character development using the Scout Oath and 12 points of the Scout Law. Those skills and character traits promote good behavior and academic success in the classroom. Locally, Occoneechee now has an inaugural class of 25 female Eagle Scouts. Nationally, the judge approved the settlement last Friday, and Occoneechee is honored to welcome in September at the annual Friends of Scouting event in Raleigh, the 43rd President George W. Bush. It is an epochal time in scouting. Wake has 145 active scouting units, including Cub Packs, Scout Troops, and we are one of the top councils in America. Occoneechee wants to better reflect our community. Eagle projects alone counted for more than 10,000 volunteer hours of community service, and not including unit service projects. Our commitment to our community and youth is strong, and we have increased our commitment to youth with financial needs substantially. Occoneechee is committed to making scouting available and affordable to all Wake families. I would like to invite the families of Wake County Public Schools to join Occoneechee Council for families to come and camp out with us under the stars, whether at the 2,000-acre Scout Camp near Carthage, a Mudcats Camp-In, and many local unit activities. There's no substitute for learning environmental stewardship outside. As an adult scouter since 2014 myself, I would put it squarely before this board that scouting offers lifelong, extensive adult leadership training and skilled adult mentors that teach over 135 merit badges for youth, which lead to marketable skills, and we are ready right now to launch Explorer clubs and posts for middle schoolers and high schoolers, whether at a school or at a local fire, police, EMS, trooper, or sheriff station, to help Wake municipalities recruit teenagers to learn experientially about great careers. Occoneechee would like to become a proven community partner to Wake Public School Board and the school system. Leadership and citizenship and so much more. We are publicly asking the board, if it's possible with policy, and the only policy I have is 5210, to host a countywide or district-wide Scout night in the fall with Scout tables at fall open houses.
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Thank you.
You're welcome to email the rest of your comments to a member of the board.
Thank you.
We'll share that. Thank you. Our next speaker is Aaron Schultz.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here this evening, and thank you for the work you do as a school board. It is really appreciated. I'd like to discuss curriculum and the inclusion of gender identity, pronouns, and diverse families. First, it's important to acknowledge the diversity present in Wake County Public Schools and all public schools across the state and country. Every school has families with members of the LGBTQIA+ community. Some schools have families with trans parents. Some have schools with trans kids, non-binary kids, gay and lesbian students. These people are members of our school community and deserve to be respected and represented in books, photos, and curriculum. The kindergarten social studies curriculum expects that students understand how individuals are similar and different. The objective for that standard is explain similarities in self and others. You cannot expect a teacher to meet those objectives while ignoring the fact that there are gender-diverse students in their classrooms. One way to meet that objective is to ensure the class library includes books featuring diverse characters. There are dozens of children's books appropriate to kindergarten and preschool that include transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming children. And I want to make one other thing abundantly clear. Teaching about gender is not teaching about sex. It is not sex education, and it is not discussing sexual activity. Gender and sexual identity are completely different. Acknowledging that some families have two moms or two dads is just the same as recognizing that some families have foster parents, and some families have grandparents, and some families are multi-generational. They're all valid and loving homes. Schools owe it to the students, teachers, and families to represent and respect all members of the community. Students who see themselves represented in curriculum and books feel more supported and are more academically successful. Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker is Michelle Morrow.
Hey, thanks for giving me this time. I appreciate it. I had the privilege of going to the House Select Committee meeting yesterday where they were discussing how we were going to use our monies to overcome what's happened in the last 2 years of learning loss and where we find ourselves right now. And I'm hoping that you guys are going to take what they talked about and maybe we can make a plan for overcoming what's happened to our kids in the last 2 years. I don't think it's just been 2 years, if I'm going to be honest with you. I think that we have been mismanaging our funds for a really long time. And I'm going to tell you one way that that's happened. Bureaucratically, yesterday, the DPI mentioned that most people know we received $6.1 billion in COVID relief money just for the educational system here in North Carolina. And my question is, how is it that we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars and we've started a new department that is called the Office of Learning, Recovery, and Acceleration, and they spent the last year, and they said they did rigorous, robust research. They know everything about every student and where they've tested from the time they got into school until this past year in 2021. And they said, you know what they came up with? Wow, lo and behold, kids have got to be in school to see people's faces and to do in school. Let me tell you, for the last 3 years, parents and teachers and students have been telling you guys the same exact thing. Why is it that we had to spend hundreds of millions of dollars? And now you know what they said when they were asked, are there any schools within North Carolina that potentially the kids aren't 15 months behind in Math 1 or in Math 8, or 8 months behind, 10 months behind in English 1? And they said, yeah, there are a few schools. And when they were asked, what have those schools done differently? The number one was in Union County because they opened up sooner than any other county in North Carolina. But beyond that, the question was, have you talked to the administrators? Have you talked to the teachers? Have you talked to the people on the ground? And what have they done to help these students to get where they need to be? And it hasn't been done. You know what their response was? Their response was, well, that's what we're going to study in the next year. So why don't we take the next $100 million for the ESSER 3 section, and now we're going to determine that. No. You know what we need to do? Call these administrators, call the teachers, find out what works. I completely believe that we have the expertise, we have the staff, we have the knowledge, and we have the money in Wake County to prepare our kids for life. There is absolutely no reason why 50%, we're all bragging about the fact that Wake County came in 8th, in one of the recent polls about the great school system. Did you read the fine print? 90% graduation rate, and out of that, almost 50% of our graduating seniors are not proficient in reading and math. We are relegating them to a life of minimum wage work. That was the statistic. It's 46%, 44% of our students are not reading or not math proficient, and 50% are not reading proficient.
Next speaker
Thank you
is
so
Becky
much.
Luhops.
Hey, good to see you guys again. As you know, I'm Becky Lou Hobbs. I've been here many times. I just want to say welcome to the new school year. You know, the school started for some kids, for others, starts at the end of the month, and I'm personally looking forward to it. You've had 3 school years that have been affected by COVID. So now I'm wondering what this 4th year is going to bring. And I sure hope it's going to be different. I'm looking forward to the school year with my children. I'm looking forward to meeting their teacher in person and not on a computer screen. I'm looking forward to seeing all their smiling faces and not hiding behind a mask. I'm looking forward to kids eating with each other at lunch and not sitting separated or isolated or on the floor. I'm looking forward to kids being able to play with each other and to hug with each other and not being forced to stay at least 6 foot apart. I'm looking forward to being able to volunteer in my child's classroom and not being told parents aren't allowed, but NCAE members are. I'm looking forward to my children resuming their learning journey and not having to focus on government control. And what I'm most looking forward to is a new board that focuses on quality education and listens to parents. So what have these few years left for our children's educational journey? As Michelle said, the House Select Committee met yesterday, and North Carolina Department of Public Instruction had a lot of data showing by subjects how far the children were behind. They said in some cases it can take 3 to 4 years to get back on track. Just think what we've done to our high school age students. And I will stress again, Union County, how did they fare? Because it was asked specifically about Union County at this meeting. They said schools that did not close long and were in person performed better, like Union County, but schools that were closed longer and did virtual learning had worse results, Wake County. So what is Wake County going to do to help get our children back on track? You know, we had Read to Achieve over the summer, and from the people I've talked to, there's been some success with that program. But the committee spoke about just sending kids to remedial classes is not the answer. We have to identify the areas that the children are not proficient to tutor them specifically in those areas. And time again, tutoring has been shown to be the most effective. So what is Wake County going to do about that? Providing more tutoring services to our children. So once again, you know, I'm very hopeful for this new 4th school year that we've been affected by COVID. I'm hopeful for the change the students need. I'm hopeful for the November elections. Thank you so much. They're our children, our future.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Carrie Bly.
Okay. I don't want to change my speech, but that was a hard work session to listen to with your advocacy for special education children, Dr. Martin, when you and I had a very bad conversation years ago, and to the rules of this room, I won't repeat anything, but what bothers me the most is that your rationale makes sense when you're talking about something that you care about, like masks, but doesn't apply to parents who have a special needs child that are just trying to help their kids learn core subjects at home. You are right. At the same time, I think we can and must do better. I know you've talked to people who have tried to get accommodations that are extremely frustrated. So are we. It's in my child's 504 that she get visual learning math material that I've never seen in the 4 years we've been coming here. The system should be required to make accommodations for the disadvantaged students, and the burden should not and cannot wholly be on the disadvantaged students, and I'm going to add family. To get my child to learn math, to go to a four-year college, we have to pay for outside tutoring. It should not wholly be our responsibility. You may need to require certain environments so that all students, including special needs students, have access to a public education. That does apply to students who have executive functioning skills that can't stand the loudness of the room when they're all sitting together every single day. So you're right. I think we should do better. Us old people, we didn't come into this world with the inherent skill set of being able to take detailed notes on subjects. This was my original speech. You and I acquired such knowledge by emulating our teachers, emulating how they orchestrated their information and presented their notes, and by emulating the formats we saw in our formal textbooks. We learned to identify main topics, then map our brains to organize subtopics, categorize, prioritize, and file away. We use those maps to focus, stabilize, lock in, and record information. You actually do this with your board agenda. It's set just like our old thesis outlines. But our children today don't really understand or have the opportunity to develop skills like that, do they, if you really think about it? Because beyond basic chapter organization in novels, they've rarely seen or experienced nonfiction material laid out in an organized fashion. And we have found that absence of such structure in your secondary math courses to be debilitating to our kids. Information needs to get from point A to point B somehow. And when you don't provide students with organized math learning material, by default, you have forced these kids to become scribes of their own learning content, like monks, hand copying books in dusty basements. Students have been frantically copying notes from overhead projectors for years or whiteboards. Due to lack of resources, teachers are forced to print out lengthy worksheets, fill in the blank to use as core content. That's me.
Thank you, Ms. Fly.
Thanks.
Our next speaker is Pete Fly.
So proud of her. You need to listen to her more. All right. An estimated 65% of the population are categorized as visual learners. That's why we've been coming here for 3 years asking us if you can show what students are visibly learning in a math class, or show us what materials they have to visibly review the math skills they are supposed to have mastered throughout the year. You implemented new middle and high school math curriculums based on some very serious cognitive assumptions that students can acquire basic math skills based solely on task-based collective learning. Yet you have not collected, well, you may have collected, but you haven't presented any actionable data on these programs in almost 5 years now. We want to see that data. We want you to dig deeper. Don't you want to know how it's actually working? You did contact a third party to evaluate the implementation of these curriculums before the pandemic hit, and it was not exactly a favorable report. We're still wondering why you're not asking some very hard questions. If students are facing grade recovery courses and have to go to summer school because they failed high school classes and were derailed from their graduation timetables, wouldn't you like to know what classes they're failing? What's derailing them? Why 50% don't have basic skills when they leave high school? Because based on our conversations in the community, our suspicion is it's mostly math or reading. All right? Don't you think this might be a worthwhile topic for discussion for this board? You seem to be good with asking academically gifted students if they are challenged enough, but why aren't you asking average students if they have the resources they need to do their math homework every night? Why not ask parents if they have to pay for outside math tutoring? You barely engaged 14% of your middle school math teachers before purchasing and implementing Open Up resources in 2019. That was 68 out of 500. Same curriculum adoption, you're only able to engage approximately 0.00018% of Wake County parents. That's 28 out of 160,000. Do you want us to ask them how it's working for them? Just a side story for an example. My daughter called me into her room last year to help me complete a Dreambox assignment. It was a geometry game because she had no idea what a math compass was. Never seen one a day before in her life. Next year, she's going to be able to drive, and she has no clue what a compass is or how to use it to make simple angular measurements. We've been coming here for 3 years now. We've asked you on multiple occasions to grab one of the books and actually try and do a problem on your own. And we have a feeling if you had done it, we'd be having a different conversation. But most of you, I would assume, have not. I may be wrong, but that's how I'm seeing it. So we got a new challenge for you. Take the online Wake Tech class, because pretty much at the rate that they're going, that's where a lot of them are going to end up. Try taking the online class there that's set up exactly like how your classes are set up here and see how well you do with that. Because I can tell you, it's a lot harder than it looks. Thanks.
Our next speaker is Cole McMullen.
Hello, my name's Cole. Just a little bit about me. This is the first time I've been here to speak here, but I moved from Kansas City about the end of 2020. I was fortunate to buy a home with my wife last fall. So whenever I'm thinking about school options in the future, obviously Wake County Public Schools is going to be top of mind. Which brings me to my concerns that I'm here to talk to you about today. Regarding just the inclusivity of LGBT plus students in our public schools. I want to share a few statistics that have been shared with me from a 2013 National School Climate Survey. I realize this survey might be a little dated, but I do think the information is still relevant. Only a small percentage, about 18.5% of LGBT plus students were taught positive representations of LGBT plus people, history, or events in their schools. Yet in schools with inclusive curriculum, these students were more likely to report that their classmates were somewhat or very accepting of LGBT plus people than students in schools that did not have an inclusive curriculum. 74.1% of LGBT plus students were verbally harassed at a school in the past year because of their sexual orientation. About 55.2% were harassed because of their gender expression, acting either too masculine or too feminine. The average GPA for LGBT plus students who were frequently harassed because of their sexual orientation or gender expression was significantly lower than that of LGBT plus students experiencing less harassment. Which kind of gets me to my broader point. In the future, I would like to see a school board that commits to protecting teachers who do use LGBT plus inclusive materials at all grade levels. It is my understanding that the school board effectively enacted House Bill 755 at a local level, even though it hadn't been passed into state law. Which my understanding is that is not an inclusive policy, so that I would find that very disappointing. As mentioned by one of the board members tonight, even teacher salaries are very low, and it's very difficult to keep up inflation. Morale is very low, and on that note of morale being low, I guess what I do not want to see is morale being even lower if teachers cannot feel safe to have inclusive materials in the classroom so that LGBT plus students feel safe and that they're in an inclusive learning environment. I'll wrap it up there. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Daniel Grant King.
All right. Good evening, Chairman Haffey, Superintendent Moore, district staff. I am Mr. Grant King. Currently, I'm an educator with Wake County. Also, I'm a candidate running for District 4 this November. On this evening, I would like to, first of all, give a welcome back to those in the year-round and non-modified calendars, as the school year has already begun for many, and of course, I will begin on the 29th with traditional calendar. Regarding the budget, as district staff continue to work with each of you on the budget and the new salary changes that will be made for the new upcoming school year, I would like to just take the opportunity to keep in mind that many teachers and educators have left this profession because they have expressed concerns time and again to each of you, and many of educators have felt unheard. While the budget is looming, I am urging each of you to think about the retention and how you all could come up with different ways to make sure that our educators have the resources, the time, and also how we are going to be able to not make sure that educators stay within this profession. Like Dr. Martin said this evening, even though the challenges come, in the midst of it all, we stay for our students. And that is what matters at the end. Because when they leave the school system, it'll be up to us wondering how they're going to make it even into the future. So as we prepare and as election days is less than 100 days away, I want each of you on this board to think about how educators and why they have left. Because 9 times out of the 10, think about it, educators have wealth of knowledge based upon not only in the education profession, but in the workforce as a whole. So I urge this board yet again to think about the ways that you all and district staff could work together, not only to increase compensation, but to increase the resources that are given so that our students and families could come through our school doors and be able to say that Wake County was able to provide the resources necessary for their child or children to succeed. Again, I would like to thank the board for what work that they have already done. However, there is much more to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christina Spears.
Good evening, Superintendent Moore, Chair Mahaffey, Vice Chair Hagerty, and board members. I'm Christina Spears, a special education teacher by trade, currently serving as Wake NCAE's president. We are an affiliate of the North Carolina Association of Educators and part of the National Education Association, the largest labor union in the United States. Wake NCAE values celebration. We believe expressing gratitude and celebrating victories big and small will sustain us in the face of challenges and uncertainty. We believe hope and empathy are essential parts of our planning process that allows us to reject fear and hopelessness. Wake County Public School System has core beliefs that are essential to how we choose to operate as a school system. I want to highlight core beliefs 3 and 5. 3 states well-supported, highly effective, and dedicated principals, teachers, and staff are essential to our success for all students. And core belief 5 says the Board of Ed, superintendent, and all staff value a diverse school community that's inviting, respectful, inclusive, flexible, and supportive. I lift up these 2 core beliefs in the face of challenges like vacant positions that impact the work educators do with students each day, which is an issue facing countless districts in the state and across our country, and in light of uncertainty like full funding from the state or the fate of DPI's licensure and compensation proposal. The new school year is a perfect opportunity to choose celebration, joy, and hope over fear, futility, and hopelessness. I always appreciate superintendent and board members' comments that highlight our schools, celebrate our staff and our students, and remind us of the hope for our future. I want to recognize and celebrate the progress we have made as a district regarding conversations and decision-making as we continue to deal with global health concerns and how to best use remote instruction as appropriate for our community. I'll use the rest of my time to celebrate the many public school workers who have worked hard to safely and effectively welcome students back to our school buildings. I want to highlight the joy I've seen on social media during this back-to-school season. Fresh fits for the first days, stories about how much families and students love their schools and their new teachers, new hire orientations where workers are excited to join their school community. I hope folks, including Wake District leadership, board members, staff, students, families, and community members, choose to celebrate our public schools and lean into back-to-school season. Each Wednesday, Wake NCAE wears red for Ed to show our solidarity and love for public schools. Tomorrow, I'll be wearing red to celebrate the joy of back to school. I invite public school staff and allies to join us and continue to share why we love our Wake County Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Chad Stahl.
Hello, happy Tuesday. The Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, just released an article recently that speaks to not only the fact that children have suffered a loss in learning, but they have also suffered a loss in emotional learning. So they put this thing out with 5 bullet points. I like this little excerpt, so I'm going to read it to you. Part of the difference between good stress that motivates a student to perform well and toxic stress that can lead to mental and physical health problems is whether a student feels otherwise stable and able to control and limit the source of stress. So when we talk about exemptions and we talk about honoring each individual child, I'm just curious if that means for all children that need the exemption, or are you wanting to shift the opportunity for exemptions to only certain children and not all children? On the lost learning, I haven't seen anything or heard anybody really talk about, okay, hey, there is a gap. I think last year we were all told that it didn't exist, that it was just made up. It was a false construct. They're not learning. They're not losing any learning. No, kids are resilient. Kids are resilient, but yet I don't see us testing that resilience in the academics. I see us only testing that resilience when it comes to restricting them, masking them, keeping them home, finding out how much they can actually handle, how much they can take. That's what we have done. And I think that this board sends so many mixed signals, right? If you are, there are 2 of you here tonight with masks on. If this were a political outing where you were supporting your candidate of choice, you would be mask-free and high-fiving one another and hugging one another. So I'm just, the mixed signals is so hard to follow. It's so hard to track. It's like, I don't understand. Are you wearing your mask here because you're afraid of one another? You're afraid of the people 30 feet away from you? But then when you get into your political bubble, and COVID is gone, is there something there that I'm missing? Is there a reason why we keep seeing some of you guys in political settings enjoying the company of others, but then when you're here in the public setting, I just don't understand it. Maybe one day someone will say, you know what, I wear my mask at board meetings because of X, Y, and Z, but whenever I'm somewhere else in a group of people, I choose not to wear my mask because of whatever reason. Because it's really hard to follow. If I were a child and I were looking at my board member and I go, okay, well, when do I get to take my mask off? Because they can't tell. You're telling them one thing while you're doing something different. That's not leadership. That is not leadership.
Our next speaker is Tracy Taylor.
Good evening. Actually, yes, I'd probably finish that sentence by saying it's not leadership, it's hypocrisy. That's just my take. I listened to a little bit of the work session today, so I didn't get a chance to see all of it, so hopefully I'm not speaking about this. But added again, Dr. Martin spoke again about the hospitalizations and how Wake County was so fortunate because we had all of these extra beds, even though we had all of these cases, so we were extra special because we could accommodate way more people at our hospitals than maybe other counties. But when you actually look at the 8 different categories of the regions that are in North Carolina, you can see today that we are at risk of no issues with hospitalizations. As a matter of fact, hospitals across North Carolina are losing money because they're only 67% occupied. And people who work in the hospitalization or in the hospital systems know that when you're profitable, it's when you're at around 90 to 95% capacity. But I digress. Ms. Scott spoke about how she was concerned about the children having access to remote learning if, we should have to go to remote days and all of that. And Ms. Scott, I actually agree with that. And one thing that maybe we can use to address that goes back to the Bly's comments, which are, maybe textbooks, right? We can use those on days that schools are closed. But again, I digress. I'd also like to address what one of the speakers said about Union County, actually, a few of them. How many times did I come here telling you that there was no statistically significant difference in counties with masks on versus masks off. I am so tired of having this discussion. I've had it with several of you on this board privately, many times each. From one of you, I heard, well, you know, I want to know what's going on in the rest of the country. My response was, all you need to do is look across the ocean, because what's going on there is happening here. Well, you know, I really don't care what happens in Israel. Guess what? All of a sudden, Cody Kinsley said what happens over in across the ocean is what happens here. So does now what I say make sense to you? We've got to get past this mask issue and forcing children to mask. Schools in Wake County opened mask optional last year. Schools across the nation opened mask optional. There was not an issue. There was not a problem. Can we just move on?
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Our next speaker is Mike Nutt.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. I'm a father of a rising third grader at Conn Elementary. I was dismayed at the recent resignation of a Ballantyne Elementary teacher because they had inclusive supplemental materials in their classroom. The image that got her in trouble with the right-wing extremists on Fox News was in every way appropriate for a preschool environment. That was a picture of two people. Maybe one of them was pregnant. That's it. The poor mental health of our queer students is a crisis in North Carolina, and we need to be doing everything we can from the earliest stages to create welcoming environments for children from every type of family, and that includes basic representation and teaching materials. Queer people and queer families have a right to exist, and therefore families of every type should be represented unapologetically in classroom teaching materials. So let's be clear about what just happened. HB 755 was shelved in the General Assembly this summer, but the bigots got exactly what they wanted in Wake County when this Ballantyne teacher was forced to quit. These right-wing extremists launched a nationwide harassment campaign that successfully bullied a well-loved teacher into resigning. This will further embolden them. If our teachers cannot depend on our school system leadership to defend the use of inclusive teaching materials in all grades, then Don't Say Gay has already been implemented in Wake County. If one teacher can be forced to resign, any teacher can. The main homophobic goal of HB 755 has already been achieved here. It didn't need a single Republican vote. It was voluntarily implemented when nobody on this board fought to intervene in this situation. By failing to protect and reinstate this teacher and promise that it would never happen again, this board willingly did the fascist work for them. How do we prevent this from happening again? If our school board cannot protect our best teachers from bigots, then they need to be replaced with school board members who can. In an email, I asked my District 4 representative if she would commit to protecting inclusive teaching materials in all grade levels, and she declined to do so. Now, I ask, will any of you? Are you okay with Don't Say Gay being the unofficial policy of Wake County schools? Or do you want a legacy of protecting our teachers when they do the right thing?
Our next speaker is Brandy Sullivan. Is Ms. Sullivan here? No? Our final speaker is Rachel Ungwarian. Okay. That concludes public comment. Moving on to our information items, we have our superintendent updates. Superintendent Moore.
Good evening again. I'm going to cover very quickly the Finance Committee as well. During Finance Committee today, the board was presented with the options that will come forward for board action at the next board meeting on the 16th regarding the final reconciliation of the budget that will include a move to a minimum of $16 an hour for staff in the district, a 4% raise implemented for all staff based on the legislative outcome. We included also the dollars that it would cost to make up the difference between the $56 million that was requested from the county commissioners and the $50 million that was allocated, as well as the increased costs associated with some of the benefits and salary changes made by the legislature. We look forward to bringing that to the board on the 16th at the next board meeting, and continue to welcome any questions or public comment as it comes in. During the work session today, we had 2 items on the work session. The first one was health guidance updates, and these focused on our current situation in the county and in the state where we find ourselves based on the CDC community metrics. We also talked about the sunset of the Strong Schools Toolkit from North Carolina DHHS, the shift to looking at the CDC guidance and the recommendations that are made there. And as a concluding sort of statement, we are continuing to work with our local health department on how to implement that guidance, and there were a number of issues that were brought up by the board that we'll need to have some follow-up on, and we are meeting weekly and regularly with the health department, so we will include that as a part of our work there and bring back updates as needed for the board. We also had a presentation from academics on some changes to legislation this year that provided a continuation of the option for districts to use up to 5 days or 30 hours for remote instruction for emergencies in the district. We just had a discussion about how staff was looking at that option. We communicated that for us it really is a last resort type option, one that we would not look at until after banked hours and days and or other teacher work days and options were being used. And really what we were looking at is if something requires a calendar change, like taking spring break or winter break or something along those lines, that that would be when we might consider it. However, there's no decision at this point. We've gotten feedback from some students, from some staff. Our next step is to get some feedback from families on the pros and cons. We know that our remote asynchronous days, as they were during the pandemic, were not met with great success with some folks and not others. Differentiation among grade levels, all of that sort of thing. Access to technology becomes an issue, all of those. And so there's no decision before the board on this. We're just continuing to gather information based on the flexibility that is allowed by the legislative changes, and we'll continue to bring you updates as we get more information and get more feedback. And that was our work session. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore, for that recap. Anyone interested in knowing more about what we just heard can go back and look at the Finance Committee or the work session when they get archived on YouTube. Up next is our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, the motion passes. Moving on to action items. Our first action item comes out of policy and is Board Policy 4150, School Assignment and Transfers, second reading. With us is Ms. Susan Pulliam, Senior Director of Student Assignment, and this is being brought to action on second reading because we had some changes when it was on first meeting.
Thank you, Chair Mahaffey, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. I'm here to present the second reading of our revised Policy 4150, School Assignment and Transfers. Revisions reflect updates made by the North Carolina School Boards Association and by staff. The policy was reviewed and presented for first reading at the July 19, 2022 board meeting. At that meeting, the board directed staff to incorporate additional language in Section B, temporary membership caps. You will find the added language highlighted in yellow on page 3 of the revised policy. Additionally, we were advised by council that we should insert additional language within Section C, assignment of students to particular schools, in numbered item 1, students admitted based on domicile. We did bring this to your attention during the July 19th meeting, but you will now find the added language highlighted in yellow on page 4 of this revised policy. When given final board approval, the revised version will replace current policy. Tonight, we do request that the board approves revised policy 4150, school assignment and transfers.
Ms. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Mahaffey. I move approval as presented of Board Policy 5150, school assignment and transfers, revisions on second reading.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just thank you. You did, and thank you, Mr. Bloomberg, for putting words together and for student assignment. Thank you for doing this. I think this will cover all the areas we were talking about. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate Ms. Cash, you bringing up the issues about capping so that we make sure that we have clarity for our schools and for the staff to make sure that we're being fair. Thank you.
Any further questions or discussion on this? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of passing the amended policy 4150, school assignment and transfers, please signify with a sign of aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? All right. That passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and we will bring as an information item the updated RNP once it's finalized.
Okay.
Thank you.
Up next are proposed updates to the 2022-2023 instructional calendars. With that is Mr. Glenn Carosa and Ms. Tamani Anderson-Powell.
Good evening. Chair Mahaffey, members of the board, Superintendent Moore. Staff is seeking approval for the revised 2022-2023 instructional calendars. Staff brought to you during the board work session on July 19th possible revisions for Election Day and Juneteenth Day. So today we are seeking your approval for those revised calendars. What I would like to propose is that we approve just the calendars with the exception of multi-track year-round. We have a presentation we'd like to share with you today to discuss some additional ideas that we'd like to discuss with multi-track year-round calendars.
Okay. So that would be let's see. Well, do we want to do the presentation first and then we can adopt all the calendars, or are you looking for?
We're looking for a vote at a later date for the multi-track year-round calendars. We'd bring it back after this discussion.
Okay.
So we're requesting approval of all the calendars changed with the exception of the multi-track year-round calendar, and whether you want to do the motion second and then discussion or discussion first, we're good either way.
Okay. Vice Chair Hagerty.
So at this time, I would move board approval of the proposed changes in the 2022-2023 instructional calendars with the exception of the multi-track year-round calendar at this time.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions or discussion on this?
Glenn, why don't you go ahead and go with the wrinkle?
Okay. All right, so the slide deck that we have here, we're bringing to your attention the multi-track year-round calendar. So as we looked at instructional days and at the end of
Just one more thing. These slides are available in Assembly if you'd like to look under MTYR, multi-track year-round.
Okay. We're trying to pull them up as well.
So we should look at the one that says retest, summer retesting.
That's the wrinkle,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
That's a wrinkle.
So as staff looked at the multi-track year-round calendar, we also got feedback from schools regarding the end-of-year testing that we had during summer school this year. And so since we were bringing changes to you right now for Juneteenth and for Election Day, we wanted to be proactive and share with you some concerns with regards to having the number of instructional days in order to fit in possible testing if you choose to elect for summer school and the retesting again for the 22-23 school year. Just to recap, in 2021-22, we participated in this program. We used bank days for the multi-track year-round calendar schools on June 28th and 29th so that schools could administer the testing prior to July 1st. We preferred to do this before July for several reasons. There were concerns over logistics for transportation and food service, concerns over staff availability, and concerns over impact on clopening activities. As you know, we've had discussions before. A lot goes into the clopening where you're closing out one school year and opening the next, staff trainings and whatnot, getting the buildings ready. So taking those days for testing would take away from those activities for schools. So for 2022-23, if you choose to do the summer school program again, we have several options we'd like to share with you. Option one would be to use the remaining 2 bank days for June 29th and June 30th Just a reminder, you use the bank day for Election Day. And then the factors to consider, multi-track year-round schools would then have no bank days built into the calendar. Option 2, you could move December 22nd, which is the first day of the winter break, and October 10th, which is a district-wide workday, to June 29th and June 30th. The factors to consider there would be using December 29th would reduce the number of days off for winter break, which doesn't seem to be a choice that you'd like to use in the past for when we looked at Election Day. October 10th is a district-wide workday, but it would not impact letters training for multi-track year-round schools. Option 3 would be to use the October 10th teacher workday and one bank day. Therefore, you would have October 10th as a teacher workday. We would no longer have that for multi-track year-round schools. It would remain a workday for all other calendars, but it would not impact letters training, and then they would have one remaining bank day in reserve for multi-track. And again, this is just for multi-track year-round schools. When we looked at the days to add, there's many days that people are requesting that we do not have students in the building. The Election Day became one that we talked about earlier. There are multiple days that our schools are used as polling sites, and so as we look forward to creating these calendars, we're going to continue to seek your guidance with regards to which days we should prioritize first as we're looking for providing teacher workdays throughout the district. In this year, we used current early release days for letters training. And so the days that we used for the hours that we banked for letters training, we could use that moving forward for 23-24 to implement these testing days at the end of the multi-track year-round calendar, should you choose to continue with that. So just to review and next steps, staff is recommending to use a teacher workday on October 10th and a bank day in order to complete the retesting if you decide to participate again in 2022-23. The early release days, again, would be that time that we can use moving forward to participate in this program. And that staff will bring the multi-track year-round calendars for 22-23 back to the August 16th board meeting for approval. And I open up to any questions.
Okay. Vice Chair Hagerty.
Thank you. So, Chair Mahaffey, what I'd like to do, I think it'd be appropriate at this time, is to amend my motion that the motion is for board approval of the proposed changes for all of the 22-23 instructional calendars with the adoption of option 3, the staff recommended option for the summer testing as presented by staff.
If no one seconds it, it dies for lack of a second. So, I mean, is there a second to?
I think we need a little bit more discussion before we make that determination. The reason is because, I mean, I have no problem with it, but to make a calendar change without having the opportunity for additional feedback is generally not something that we do. So, I mean, this gave us some feedback, which is important, but I do think that it's generally important for calendars to be able to hear from the community in case that we missed something. So that would be my concern about adding it tonight.
So if we're debating the motion, then I have more I can say, but if there's no second, then we'll pause it.
I don't hear a second.
Okay.
So we're back to the original
discussion.
motion, which is all calendars except multi-track year-round. So we'll go to the other hands that were up. Dr. Martin, we'll start with you.
So my question, which potentially would have allowed me to endorse this, we talked in work session when we were talking about calendars about how elementary schools have more banked time than traditional calendar school than high schools. Middle schools, I think, are intermediate. But so my question is, even though we technically don't have the banked days, if we work from a framework where all schools have the same number of banked days, if we go to that differential model, recognizing that elementary and I do believe middle schools also have more bank time than do high schools, would there be the opportunity to just go ahead and use 2 bank days to take care of this? If we did that, then I would be glad to second the motion because that would not change anything.
Could I just make one possible suggestion? There's no problem with having two different motions on this item. It seems to me that there is a motion and a second that I'm not hearing any dispute over, and that's to deal with all of the schools other than the year-round. Perhaps if you just voted on that, if the board's okay, and then sort of take up this issue further so that we're not into the amending complication, if that's something that would be okay with the board.
Yeah, if that follows parliamentary procedure, I think we're good with that. Is there anything on the calendars aside from multi-track that there are questions about with board members or discussion points? I think we're thankful for the calendar committee and staff's work on making sure this happens. I think we heard that going forward, at least general election day, we'd like to make a day where our students are not in school moving forward. So with the original motion being all calendars aside from multi-track year-round, adopting the proposed changes, can we get all in favor to say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, that motion passes. Now moving on, we need a motion. We need a motion.
I mean, you can have a discussion
We can
and
just
then a
discuss,
motion.
right? Yeah,
It's
good.
being presented. And I just have one question. The proposal that you're making on the year-round schools, that is not in the materials yet? It doesn't have all of that, I mean, in the actual calendars that are attached?
We do not have a
Okay,
copy
so
of
that's
that
what
calendar
You'd like
attached.
to come back at the next meeting
Correct.
and show it in the calendars. Okay, thank you.
Correct. We just have it in the slide deck.
Okay, thank you very much.
So for purposes of discussion, then I won't push adoption of the multi-track option at this point. I do see that staff is recommending bring it back on August 16th. I was just hoping, for families trying to get some more certainty about what the calendar looked like, if we agreed to it and there was no objection, I would rather pull the Band-Aid off and go ahead and do it. But I will go with the staff recommendation about this. The multi-track schools that we have do tend to be in a lot of our most populated areas. And the county sets these elementary schools as polling places. I don't know how many voters we'll get in 2022. It's an off-year election. If you look at our previous off-year election, 2018, Parkside Elementary had over 2,000 voters that came in on that election day year-round. I saw Carpenter, also year-round, 1,670. Sycamore Creek, year-round elementary, 1,500 voters. And it just goes on like that. Austin Ridge had 1,250. Now, at this recent runoff primary, Austin Ridge might have only had between 60 and 80 people the whole day. So there is a difference between the elections that we have. So I think the need is just as great or even greater at some of our year-round schools, multi-track year-round schools, because of the volume of voters that they're getting on our general election day. But I have no problem with deferring to the 16th if that's what the board requires.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. And my question about the presentation from staff right now for the multi-track year-round calendar is really more centered around the retesting, because that was something we had discussed. We allowed staff to do that option, if I recall. But then I don't recall there being a lot of follow-up in terms, and perhaps there was from Dr. McMillan, but follow up on how many people utilize that, how many families utilize that, because that's different from Read to Achieve. But we allowed staff to do that because the state did provide funding specifically for retesting. And I was just curious, this would be to accommodate retesting, and I just wondered, is the state providing special funding for that again? Are we anticipating that? And how was that utilized this past summer?
I think that we would need to bring the report. We're still gathering the data on like the results, the impact of that. We don't have all those. Those results don't get certified until the fall. So we would have an update for the board in the fall. Making the decision about the calendar allows us to keep that option open as we make that decision moving forward.
Ms. Cash?
I guess the year-round principals have input on these calendars, right? So you've taken good care of them.
We've gotten feedback from them, yes.
Thank
Ms. Carter, did you have, okay.
Yeah, I was going with that, but also I wanted to kind of add a little bit, is just for those who might not be aware, the retesting isn't just retesting. It's actually a time period where the students are coming in and we're working with them, or our staff is, so I think that that's important. I would like to keep that option on the table. That's just for those who, but it would be very helpful, but the data is not all available yet, but it would be helpful if we could have that. But I think it's an option just because get some of the students that are struggling back in to get some of that extra work there. So
I think it helps that that is an opt-in and not a requirement for our students. Okay. Is there any?
When it comes back, I would welcome looking to see if we can use that elementary, middle additional bank time. Because I don't think we need to, I think we're a complex enough system, we need to do a better job of differentiation. And I think this could be a situation where that might be possible. Don't know.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to get rid of a teacher workday, but I would appreciate seeing the calendars again and what that would look like on the 16th. So I think we're going to table this for now, but general support for Election Day continuing, but we'll learn more on the 16th.
And if
when
you have
come
any
back
other
to us.
data points that you'd like for us to bring to the table, just ask.
Well, I think the one that we've heard already perhaps might be if there's a general consensus from the board that we take a look at a second look at what banked hours are actually available at the elementary and the middle school and include that as a part of the information we provide the board. Yes?
I think so, yes.
Yes. And I think having the overall number of year-round schools that are polling sites, I think Mr. Hegarty's data is very compelling, how many hundreds of people are going through our schools. I think it's a sad commentary, actually, that that safety is a concern on a day when we're expressing democracy and voting, and that our students aren't witnessing that because of safety concerns. That's just sad to me. But I do hope that by doing this, all of our staff members, our educators, and everyone in Wake County will go to the polls. They'll take their children with them if they have children at home so that they can witness democracy in action and certainly make sure that our employees are out there in force. Thank you.
And certainly a voter trying to access a voting site during carpool or a parent trying to get in and out of carpool when your school is a voting site is also a concern.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. That carpool and, yes, and hundreds of people coming doesn't always work.
Ms. Cash?
When we see how many of our schools, year-round and schools, are used and how many days are used, because I know we do an awful lot of early voting, I do want to look at that because I think we need to know if we need to do additional funding for whatever security we need.
I'm just going to mention
2
that.
or 3 days
Right.
per year.
The board has directed staff to continually look at in future calendars the November election date. I think any further than that would require some additional conversation. As a footnote and an aside, I have been in contact with Gary Sims from the Wake County Board of Elections to set up some time to discuss some potential for alignment on messaging, use, expectations, and so forth. So that's kind of an aside to this, but that should be happening sometime in the next couple of weeks. And in this particular case, I think what we're looking at also is, and I just want to be clear, our plan was thinking to bring this back as an action item for multi-track year-round with any further discussion at that point. But if you feel it requires more discussion, we could put it for a few minutes on a work session, but we would still want to vote on it that same night, so.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Croza. We will look forward to that discussion on the 16th.
By the way, I think it'd be appropriate to Ms. Cash's point. I don't believe any of our schools are used for early voting.
Okay, that's good.
Our schools are only used for precinct voting, election day voting.
Okay, thank you. I did not know that, so I appreciate that.
Mr. Hager and I had this conversation. We think the only exception is the Southeast Raleigh YMCA, which is also the Southeast Raleigh Elementary School. But I think that's the only one that has been an early voting site.
So our next action item is board action. So there's no staff member for this to present. We have our board advisory councils, and it's determining board advisory council membership for the 2022-2023 school year. So all of the schools, each school in a board member's district has a board advisory council member. They meet 4 to 5 times a year to discuss information with board members. We want to be able to provide clarity to schools, the community, board advisory council members. So we're going to review the eligibility for membership in BACs in light of the redistricting and changes in board election districts. Board policy includes provisions about eligibility. This is all in your précis on Assembly, and I believe Mr. Blumberg also sent us an email with different options for this. So there is option 1, implementing new election districts at the start of the school year. So making sure our board advisory council members meet those criteria. I'm not going to read everything that's in the précis for you all. Option 2 is implement the old election districts at the start of the school year and implement new election districts after the elections. And option 3 is kind of a hybrid and allows at-large members to serve in either old or new election districts, and then implement the new election districts for BAC members that are based out of a school to change after the election. Each option has its own, ideas. So we are leaving this open so that board members can make a motion and have a second and have some discussion on that going forward. So is there a motion for a particular option, 1, 2, or 3 for board advisory council members? Ms. Cash.
I'd like to make a motion for option 1.
For option 1. So that would be implementing the new election districts. I heard a second. Who is that from? Ms. Carter? Thank you. All right. Any discussion on option 1?
I'll just note that I think I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Dr. Martin.
I think what biases me, 2 things that bias me toward option 1 is, number 1, I believe in stability for the schools. I think BACs are for schools more than they are for us. We need to listen, but they need to be the organization, and their stability throughout the year, I think, is important. And secondly, option 1 is most consistent with policy, requires no revisions of policy, and policy is there not to give stability. And so while we can do exceptions to policy, I think in general it doesn't make good sense. So I strongly support option 1.
Ms. Kushner?
Also wanted to just say that option 1 is probably the cleanest and the easiest for our schools and area superintendents to implement. So it works. That works. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Carter.
I support option 1, but I'm going to throw this out here now, so correct me if this is the wrong time to do so. But I had mentioned previously my concern about another section of the policy, speaking, and I don't know if I should mention it here or not. I'm just asking for order.
I think we can bring something to policy committee meeting to discuss it further if you want to review. I don't know, Ms. Kushner, is this policy coming back to policy committee anytime soon?
It's more so about, since there's a part of the policy is requiring us to set the meetings for the school. I mean, just because, like, for myself, I know I'm not going to be there, so I'm going to do it if we're still going to require policy, no doubt. But I also feel like I'm doing it for someone else that could, they can. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think I've mentioned the whole meeting.
We could just waive the policy at some. And would that be possible to do with this motion, to waive policy on, or to at some future meeting, waive policy on that specific moment? Sorry.
I mean, my suggestion was the policy's not here for review. I'm not in any way undercutting the suggestion. I mean, you have a very good policy approach that goes through and is considered by policy committee, and that would be my suggestion on how to deal with the suggested policy change on that. And this is here before the board on how to determine the membership for this coming year. And what I understand the motion, just for clarity, is it's option one, which would be right at the start of this school year, essentially starting now, that you guys would be implementing the BAC's membership based on the new election districts. Okay, thank you.
And I think, and I'll say this as someone who came in, and took over BACs from a member, if there was a date that didn't work, I was able to work with the BAC and let Ms. Allen know if there were changes. So if we set the dates now and they don't work for a future member, I would hope and trust that future member would work with Ms. Allen and their BAC to find something that would work for them. Yeah, but that does, I think we can make sure to stress that with our BAC members for our meetings, that we're not sure if a new member comes in, if things change. But we'll, so we have a motion and a second for option one. Is there further discussion? Mr. Haggerty?
And I regret already having to bring this up and have more discussion, but I do need to have some clarification from council, because the language in the policy that I think allows this is what you've highlighted, or what was highlighted in the précis. Within a reasonable length of time following the oath of office for newly appointed or elected board members, or after redistricting, board members will have responsibility for reviewing council membership and reinstating individual membership, subject to the approval of the Board of Education. Okay, so I think I understand the intent of that, and the intent of that would clearly give us an opportunity here after redistricting to go forward with this. But I just want to make sure there's no conflict with A, council members must meet eligibility criteria for the new district at the start of the year, reside or have children, in the new district. So when they say new district, do they mean new district coming out of redistricting, or do they mean just new district in terms of a new school year or a new board member?
So you have the new election districts, and so right now, as long as the member meets the qualifications for the new districts, either being residing in there or having a child at a school in that district, then they meet the eligibility requirements.
Okay. See, that's where I'm a little concerned, because if it's circular, if it points back to the other eligibility requirements. The other eligibility requirements state, to be eligible to serve, the council member must reside within the voting district or have children in a school within the district of appointment, right? And we know from election law that when you talk about the district and a district has changed, the district does not mean necessarily the future district. When you have a vacancy, for example, right now, we had a House of Representatives member from Wake County who left a vacancy. So in order to appoint a replacement, they pulled a replacement from the existing legislative district as it was drawn from the 2020 election, not the district as it is drawn for the 2022 election. And in fact, I believe the representative selected may not even be eligible to run in the 2022 election, because that was the definition of within the voting district. It was the voting district as it was constituted at the time of the election through the end of that term. So this is how this has been interpreted before, and so I just want to make sure that your interpretation of this, because I see the intent of the policy, seems like we could do it, but I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a conflict with the eligibility requirement.
So if I could, and I know some board members have some hands up, I think it's a bit of a legal interpretation, so if you don't mind, I'll jump in. I mean, we looked at this a number of times. Our interpretation is the board has redistricted. And you've passed a resolution, you've redistricted, that's the districts that are posted by the County Board of Elections, you've redistricted. And so the new members would have to meet the new districts. And I don't see any conflict in policy. Beyond that, the law allows the board broad discretion in determining membership. And so there will be no doubt that by vote tonight, the board is giving its intent to say you want to use the new districts to determine membership. So I do not see that there will be any legal problems at all with this. It's a fair question. I appreciate it.
Dr. Martin?
By way of history, the only reason why we're in this situation is because we're in the legal limbo. We used to be staggered term districts, and it's only since the staggered terms were unresolved back in 2013 that we could even be in this scenario. If you look at the last time redistricting occurred, there was staggered terms, and based on the staggered terms, not everybody went up for election the year following the redistricting, but the new districts applied to everyone. So to follow the same logic that applied to that you raised to the House and Senate, where they run every year, that's a different scenario than what has historically been the case, and we're moving back to that case on this board, because it'd be really weird to, if you've got the staggered terms, those not up on the stagger would represent, you'd end up having some schools represented by 2 BACs and some with none. So the intent of the school system, particularly with the staggered terms, and we're getting back to the staggered terms, I believe, is to have it all happen at the same time. Different scenario than you raise in the House.
And Vice Chair Hegarty, I had the same question, and I was leaning towards option 2 for that reason, and then spoke to several of my BAC members that would be departing my district. I wasn't able to reach all of them, and they strongly preferred option 1, just citing that it was easier for them to report with one and knowing that we would be giving them similar information, and they would still have a way to give feedback to the district. So I was glad to get their feedback, and so I'm also in support of option 1 following those conversations. So is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of adopting option 1, implementing new election districts at the start of the 2022-2023 school year for Board Advisory Council memberships, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. We will now move on to closed session.
Chair Mahaffey? Yes, sir. At this point, I would move that our board move into closed session to consider confidential personnel information protected under General Statute 143, 318, 11, A1, A3, and A6, and Wallace v. WCPSS, IC file number 18-024675. Further, to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided for under North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11, and to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the board in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the board, and to consult with and instruct board staff or negotiating agents concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the board on the particulars of the acquisition of the real property for public infrastructure improvements related to the Early Learning Center at Memory Road School Site, and to receive board instructions as to the position to be taken on behalf of the board in negotiation in relation thereto. Finally, to consider confidential student information protected under General Statute 1115-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G.
And I would like to add that the real estate item has been removed from the closed session agenda. So I'm not going to ask you to reread it and amend it, but if we could all just amend that in our head, I would appreciate it. And I believe that has been updated in Simply.
I second it. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't see that.
I forgot about it.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second to enter closed session for reasons previously stated. And again, with the amendment of not including the real estate item that was shared. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. All right, we are now in closed session. Thank you.